Gentlemen, we already knew that Canada was officially eliminated after that game against Croatia, but it is time to actually drop the curtain on their time at Qatar 2022. They ended with their final group stage game against Morocco. It was a 2-1 loss for the Canadians. Now, this game could have been 3-1. Morocco had a goal called back, or it could have been 2-2 because Atiba Hutchinson was this close to tying it up. But it does begin with a 4th-minute goal for Morocco in this one. Ollie, what are your takeaways just from that particular game before we look at the tournament as a whole?
Yeah, I'll give kind of my take on the whole tournament later on, but I thought just in specifically this game, I thought it was important the way they responded in that second half. That, I think, allows Canada to go out of this tournament feeling a bit better about themselves than they otherwise might have. At halftime, I think, certainly before Canada got the first goal back, there was really a feeling that this game could get away from them, that it could become ugly, that the team was maybe deflated, obviously know that they're going to be knocked out of the tournament and not really in the right frame of mind to play this game. The response was really good. That was more like what we wanted to see from Canada. That was more like this team's identity at its best. It again spoke to the resilience of the group, the togetherness of the group, I think, was still there, and that was something they needed to answer for after some adversity. So that part of it was encouraging. Like I said, we'll get on to kind of the bigger picture takeaways and what went wrong. But I think just leaving on the right note was something that was important for this team.
Mm-hmm. Jordan?
A bit of a roller coaster, to say the least, Andy. I think when you're looking at the game against Belgium, come out flying, but don't get anything from it. Going against Croatia, best perfect start you could ask for. You score early. And then a game against Morocco is like we shoot ourselves in the foot. Canada goes 2 goals down in the first 25 minutes. Agree with Ollie in terms of the character it takes to fight back after being 2-0 down or 2-1 down at half and try to salvage something. But it seems like this Canada team, just through this tournament and through the experience throughout this game, it's just having all these learning moments all in one. And I'm just looking forward to the next little bit where we can, as a nation, we can just ride behind this team and just sort things out and really push for the next championships or the next games to come.
I can't believe it's over already. The buildup, the wait, months and months, and then 8-9 days, poof, it's over in a flash. It's just so unfortunate that the start was so difficult for Canada in this game because that resiliency, that heart on their sleeve, despite playing a better opponent, was all there. And for the second time in this tournament, they had a superior XG than their opponent. That happened both against Morocco and Belgium. Like, small wins here. I think they left it all out there. There were some lineup decisions that we'll get into that were questionable. But in terms of effort and the way that they ended up performing today, it wasn't perfect. There were mistakes, but that resiliency, that fearlessness that they continue to tote, it was all there. And you end this tournament thinking, what could have been Atiba Hutchinson? How perfect would it have been, by the way, for Atiba to get the equalizer like centimeters? That's all that separated him from a late equalizer, which would have been deserved in this game. I think that going away with that point would have made you feel a little bit better inside. Coming away with nothing seems a little bit harsh, but another difficult one where the start really hurt them here today.
Yeah, and when you talk about expected goals, that's a tricky one because, again, in this game, Canada actually coming out of all the games, the first games in the group, had the highest expected goals out of every team, 32 teams at this World Cup. And then, of course, today they do it, but the result doesn't go their way. So you always try to make sense of it in your mind. You always want to marry those two. You're like, oh, but the analytics tell us one thing, but the result is completely different. We'll dive a little bit more into that result, as you had alluded to, Gareth, based on some lineup decisions. We're going to continue to give our thoughts on Canada-Morocco, a 2-1 loss. Kristian Jack was at the game, and this is what he saw.
Canada's World Cup journey ends here at Al Thamama Stadium in Qatar after a 2-1 loss to Morocco ensured they go home with 3 straight defeats at the FIFA World Cup. Ultimately, that is a failure. It is a disappointment, but it is also a remarkable experience for a young team that know they will be hosting the World Cup in 4 years. Tonight was a similar story than the game against Croatia. Morocco played 3 technical plays in midfield. They were very good in the wide areas. Quite frankly, they were superior to Canada in most major areas. They were very good in the first half, rampant through the first 30 minutes, so much so that their home fans, and they felt like home fans here, were doing the Mexican wave and the players were playing with flip-flops on after half an hour. That's how comfortable it was for them, and they could have been up by 3 or 4. There was still positives. Lots of positives for Canada. Tajon Buchanan was undoubtedly their best player here. Scouts have been talking about him. Whenever he gets the ball, there's a roar in the crowd, a genuine excitement. And when I spoke to some of his teammates after the game, they praised him to the hilt. Many people like Atiba Hutchinson used the word brave. Others just said he is simply not intimidated. I spoke to Tajon Buchanan and he said he had a thrill of a lifetime here at the World Cup and he never felt intimidated himself. How he played in this World Cup was a remarkable positive for Canada. Junior Hoylett was very good as well, Alistair Johnston and a few others. Richie Laryea played well in this World Cup and it was puzzling to see him not start in this World Cup as well. A 4-4-2 shape from the start didn't work for Canada, and it proved that with obviously Morocco getting 2 goals off the hop. All these questions need to be asked. John Herdman himself said this week that Canada is now undoubtedly a football country. In the end, they go home much like the brilliant 1986 team that we do not talk enough about, with 3 losses. But in 1986, they could not build on that. Undoubtedly, this team will, and we'll see Tajon, Jonathan David, Alphonso Davies, Ismail Coney, Alistair Johnston, and many, many more playing once again for Canada in 4 years. We can hardly wait.
And isn't that the key, gentlemen? Where do you go from here? Which is why, as much as we have these overarching feelings of pride, and there was so much that was accomplished, there are positives, some individual players here, the positives that we can take from it. But in order to call yourself a footballing nation, in order to move forward and change things, not just for 2026, but the Gold Cup coming up next summer, we have to talk X's and O's. Jordan, you've probably figured out in your short time with us that I am a goalkeeper hugger, and that one hurt me a lot when I saw what happened in the 4th minute to Milan Borjan, who then, collected himself, gathered himself, and then I can't even imagine the panic that he felt either near the end of the game when they were pushing for that draw, and then he had to run up. And that has to be a keeper's worst nightmare when the ball then gets punted back the other way and you can't get back fast enough. Thank goodness we have, the speedster, Alphonso Davies, who did get back.
Boyan, though.
It really was. Listen, it really was. But let me ask you this. 4th minute, right? It was a blunder. The whole communication between him, Stephen Vittoria, not good. So how much criticism does Borjan deserve, Jordan, for the result of this game?
A fair bit. Canada shot themselves in the foot, and that's based off of a keeper who, rightfully so, during qualifying saved Canada many a time. But he is the only player on the pitch that no one will yell at if you blast it in the stands. No one's yelling at you like that. In itself is your job as a keeper. Like when in doubt, you literally lean back. You can close your eyes and you swing your foot through that thing. To go down in the 4th minute, and that's their first shot on goal is a nice chip. It's just it's amateur. It's naive. It's not supposed to be happening at this level. And then I want to just go and talk quickly about the second goal. Yes, later in the show I'll talk about Victoria and maybe his body positioning. But a rule of thumb: if you're on the side as a striker and you're shooting, the defender's supposed to take the far post with his legs or whatever, just making sure that he can only shoot, the striker can only shoot in the near post area. It should not go through you or under you. If he hits it top cheese, like Andy, we talked about, you'd probably do that, right? You'd hit it right under the bar and in between the post.
Yeah.
But
perfect shot.
If that's not it, it should be a save. So I'll say this simply. With teams, your best players are the people you look to and you demand a lot from. And Milan Borjan, through qualification, was that player that, hey, Canada was like, he's going to come big for us. He didn't do that in the tournament. And this is no shade towards him. But for us as a soccer country, we have to have constructive criticism. And I think if you were to ask him, he knows the quality wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we all said, but before the tournament, there were some ingredients during qualifying that were obviously the big drivers of this team's success and were going to be key at this World Cup and needed to be replicated at this World Cup. And, one of them was Milan Borjan, as he was in qualifying, was going to need to be outstanding in this tournament if Canada was to have any chance of progressing out of this group. Unfortunately, he was not. He's played a massive part in getting us here. So I think we all respect and appreciate that. But his performance at the World Cup, unfortunately, didn't live up to the standard he'd set during those qualifiers. It is an error on the goal. I don't think Vittoria puts him in a great position, to be fair to him. But like Jordan said, you've just got to put that one in Rosette's. Didn't happen. And the second one as well, I agree with Jordan, is probably one he'll watch and want back too. So that was always going to be something that Canada needed at this tournament, was great goalkeeping. We've seen it from other teams. Poland, I think, are in the next round, mostly thanks to great goalkeeping. It can be a difference maker. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite in the right way for Canada.
Yeah, those are two mistakes. Like, Canada doesn't become the top team in CONCACAF through qualifying without Milan Borjan. Like, how many, we can count so many unbelievable moments that he had. Mm-hmm. Those 2 goals are both on him. Can't be beat near post, can't give away the ball like that. He knows that. We all know that. And a lot of it was made in the post-match about tactical decisions and the formation. Like, look, there was no surprise what the weakness in this team would be. Like, the central midfield in this game, no Stefan Eustáquio. Atiba's not in the starting 11 either. Marc-Anthony Kaye gets put in there with Jonathan Osorio. That was a big ask on those 2 players. And quite frankly, other than playing Ismail Kone or Samuel Piette, there's nothing else at that position. Who was ready to play in that role? And then when you make mistakes on the field from a tactical perspective or positional perspective, then the goalkeeper is the one player that cannot be making mistakes. They need to be the eraser at times like that to come to the rescue of their teammates. Unfortunately, today, that was the difference in the game. 2 mistakes by Milan Borjan, 2 goals by Morocco. And I'm not putting it all on him. But those 2 goals are just moments that he'd want back. And despite that, Canada were still this close to coming away from the draw in the game.
Yeah, and credit to Milan Borjan. He faced the music, he spoke to the media, and he basically said, I'm sorry, right? Like, that's on me, and that was not how I wanted to perform here today whatsoever. But you just alluded to it, Gareth, when it comes to tactical decisions here, and some of the, like Jonathan David being on the bench. We know Stefan Eustáquio dealing with an injury, and also just Alphonso Davies being on the right. It switched. Herdman adjusted as the game was going on, but it did definitely seem like he was experimenting. What did you think he was also just trying to accomplish with what he was doing?
I'm not sure if he was experimenting. I think that was kind of the hand he was dealt. Like, the central midfield area, the suggestion is he should have played 3 players in the midfield. Then you're essentially taking off one of your better players. Who do you sacrifice? Junior Hoylett? Tejan Buchanan? Like, who's coming off if you're going to play that additional central midfield player? I don't think it's quite that simple, especially when your 2 preferred central midfield players aren't available, at least to start this game. So I don't blame Herdman in terms of that decision-making. When it comes to Alphonso Davies, rather than Davies' positioning, the thing that surprised me the most was Jonathan David not starting. And potentially there's a fitness issue. I'm not sure if that question was asked in the post-match, but that was the one that jumped off the page, Larin over David. David is all-world. If you told me before the World Cup that he wouldn't play 90 minutes in any of the games, I'd be surprised. Did he play 90 minutes? I don't think he played 90 minutes in the first game. If he did, apologies for being inaccurate there. But, the fact he didn't start all 3, that's a shocking decision to me. Again, there has to be something behind that. I'm not in a position here in Toronto to be questioning John Herdman. He understands what's going on in training. Perhaps he wasn't fully fit either to play a full 90 minutes. So that was the biggest surprise to me. As for Davies, I think it's a discussion worthwhile having on this show today. Where Davies and where he's going to be played with Canada moving forward, what's going to provide the best outcome? And I still think that that's an issue that's up for debate.
It is, yeah. And I know we'll get to that one. So I'll just add on the central midfield. I think it's not just about taking out a really talented player from a front line, like Will said, where it's a tough decision. Who do you take out? It's taking out a body from the front line, right? Because that was the decision I think John Herdman clearly made in this tournament. Like, he's not going to get home and watch the analysis and say, oh, yeah, I should have played another central midfielder. It's a conscious decision not to, right? Like, he's doing it for a reason. And the reason was, I think, that this team made a decision that their best chance of getting a result against these teams was to press high. And to press high, you need numbers high. And so I think ultimately Canada never really replicated how good that press was in the first half against Belgium for various reasons, right? Injuries, fitness, confidence dipping a bit, I think, as well. There's tons of different reasons there. But that was the way they decided to approach the tournament. Ultimately, they just couldn't continue it the way they started against Belgium in that first game. And we saw the team look a bit vulnerable as a result.
Did David surprise you? Jordan, that's what surprised me. That was the main surprise in their 11th.
It was a big surprise. I think also an even bigger surprise was that, okay, you want to bench him maybe so that in the second half he can come in. But I'm thinking the sub that I can bet on was David coming in to start the second half. To wait to the 60th minute, I was just like, again, Wheels, maybe Herdman knows something we don't know about fitness, so I'm not going to fully bash him. But it was a bit, the game needed something different. And to wait to the 60th minute to make that sub, it was inexplicable in my opinion.
David did play the whole game against Belgium, so apologies. So
I was about to say that was the one game he did play the full 90. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I think I was a little surprised too with Jonathan David, but we've seen this before though, as well with John Herdman, right? You go to those qualifiers in Edmonton where against Costa Rica, he gets the lone goal for Canada to beat Costa Rica. And then the next game against Mexico, he doesn't start. I don't know if it was a fitness thing with Jonathan David. I don't know if it was a feeling thing from John Herdman where he just felt like the formation he wanted to play, David just didn't suit it, whether he wanted to rest guys, bring them in later on in the game because he wanted to finish strong, because that's the thing. How you start sets an impression. How you end leaves an impression.